I audible? I'm audible, right? So I just made a joke backstage, which I'm going to make again. There are 4 amazing people on this panel. I want to introduce all of them. Actually, I'll let them introduce themselves, but I'll just give you their titles. There's a researcher, there's an executive, there's a professor, and then there's an idiot. So it's a stellar, multi-talented panel. I am here to just explore my curiosities. Before I begin, I would love for you to introduce yourselves. I think no one will do a better job than you guys. So, Niki, you want to go?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, my name is Niki Parmar. Right now, I'm a researcher at Anthropic. I've been in the AI field since 2015. I was at Google Brain, where I was part of the team that invented the transformer model, which is the foundational block for a lot of the modern AI applications today. I also went on my founder journey with Adept AI and Essential AI, and now I'm at Anthropic, trying to push on reinforcement learning and trying to push on making models align better to the tasks that we want to do with them.
Hi, I'm Siddharth. I work at 11 Labs. We are an audio AI company where we generate the most realistic audio AI speech that you can. I've been in the AI field since September of last year, so I can't do any of the things that she said, but I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Hi, I'm Vishal Misra. So my, I guess, day job is I'm a professor and Dean of Computing and AI at Columbia University. My journey to AI has been the opposite of what an academic does. I first built a commercial product, and then I tried to figure out how does this thing work. So that product I built for ESPN Cricinfo. I don't know if you're familiar. Yeah. So I was one of the founders of Cricinfo back in the day.
Yeah, I read that on your profile. It's crazy. I remember looking up Cricinfo for scores many years ago, and now here we are on the same panel. I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Varun. I create content. Actually, I don't create content. I use an AI avatar thanks to some of Sid's technology and other people's technology. It's an avatar that creates content on my behalf and somehow got to scale through all odds. That's it for me. I'll tell you what I wanted this panel to be. I wanted this panel to be us basically answering all the big questions in AI that a lot of people here would. It looks like the average age of the group is maybe 25, 30. Can we agree, like between 20 and 30? Yeah, it looks between 20 and 30. So let's try and sort of answer questions for that age group. I want to start with a very simple question, which is, how did you get into AI? So there's a researcher, there's an executive, and then there's a professor. How did you get in your own industries, in your own ways? Niki, you want to go first?
Sure. As I mentioned, my journey in AI started in 2015. But I had already started kind of reading papers and trying to implement some like really basic models as I was.
Did you study computer science?
I was studying computer science, but my focus was AI when I was doing my master's at USC. Yeah. So I had actually started, I was doing an RA at the time in machine learning, so I had already started exploring some of that. But because I did not have a PhD, when I joined Google, I joined as a software engineer. I did not join as a researcher. But I joined a team under Google Research where there was a new team starting exploring deep learning or neural networks for problems in Google search. So like that was kind of my entryway of working on data, working on models, working on evaluations, but also putting out that model in Google search. And we were like one of the early teams at Google in the time to actually productionize deep learning. But because I think the field was moving so fast, even then, like there were so many new things happening, new models, new architectures, new techniques, I wanted to find a way to get into research. So in some ways, I was at the right place at the right time. All the kind of like all the, like the main people pushing deep learning were at Google Brain at the time, and I was working with them, learning from them. So I always say, like, my years at Google Brain is like my PhD, and so I just started kind of like being curious and like trying to get more and more into research, and that's how I found my way in.
I just want to take a second to think about this moment, right? The entire AI revolution we see right now, everything we see with LLMs, every release, every update, it all traces its roots back to a paper you wrote. Attention is all you need. So I want I want everyone to clap for this because this is the person that originated all of this, along with, of course, the rest of the team. And I think there's one more thing I read when I was reading about you, which is that you actually didn't get into the IITs. Was that a moment at home? Was that a moment at home? Was that like, oh, you should have gotten into IITs, you didn't get in? Or it did not matter at home?
Yeah, I actually did not have any kind of pressure from my parents. I had to choose whatever path I found most interesting. But it is true that actually I did not get into IIT, maybe because I was not as focused or I didn't really have any pressure from anyone. But I think I was always very curious. And when I was in my undergrad in Pune, I was exploring AI. I was trying to already take some Coursera courses, and I was trying to kind of learn about the field a little bit. So I knew this was something that was interesting to me, and I knew that I wanted to do research. So that was kind of my primary motivation to go to the US. So I would say again a lot of luck and being at the right place. But I think what I enjoy about AI the most is that it's creative. It's a lot of analytical reasoning as well, because you're trying to think about the intuition in data and patterns in the models. And at the same time, it is it is something which mimics learning in the same way as humans learn. So I feel as a field, it was always very attractive to me, because of these things.
I think IIT's loss. No, it's not your loss. Sid, I want to come to you. You've been an executive, you've been a leader figure for a very long time. I'd love to know how someone gets into your seat.
Sure. So, the difference between me and the other folks on this panel are, they're all technologists, right? Varun is known as a really good creator, but at his heart, he's also a very capable engineer and technologist. I am not. Before this, I too was a Googler, and I spent about a decade at YouTube, and before that, a whole bunch of other high-growth technology companies. Now, what I could say is the following are what I believe to be true. First of all, in the way that today, whatever kind of company you work for, you find technology eating the world. Tomorrow or day after, you're going to find AI coming for you in that sense, right? Now, some things are probably closer and some things are further out. But we're definitely seeing this pervading into almost every industry. So that's the first thing. So how do you sort of cope with that? You try to look forward to what's going to happen in your field, and then you take steps to go there, right? Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. Nitin in the last panel was also saying the same, and I think that's very much true over here. So for me, for my journey, what I would say is over the last 10 to 15 years, in small iterations, you could see leaps of AI. And there's a saying that AI is anything that doesn't work yet, and when it does, it's just technology. I think you're going to find that to be the same over here. So for me, my simple steps were, number one is I could sort of see where this was going. Number two, I had to take a decision to say, hey, I want to actually be at the bleeding edge of this, and then sort of put in the work to figure out where it is I wanted to be. And then number three is to sort of craft a path for myself to get there, right? So to be in 11 Labs, it's not that one day the world opens and someone reaches out to me and says, hey, Siddharth, do you want to lead 11 Labs in India? It doesn't work that way. But you build a body of work, you see something interesting, and then you find a way to sort of put yourself in that opportunity seat, just like anything else. So my principles to that would be, A, understand what's happening. B, use any tools and all of the information that you have available to get yourself more capable and more informed about what's happening in a narrow domain. We all don't know everything about everything. And the third, think about the next 3 or 4 or 5 steps that you need to take to be in the dream job or position that you want to be in, and actively work towards it, because it won't just automatically happen. At least that's what I try to do.
How did you get into Google?
Google? Yeah. Employee referral. Never hurts. No, but I was at InMovie, and I was working on business development for various markets. And there was an opportunity to sort of go in on the ground floor at YouTube to launch everything that was non-Hindi. One of my friends was working there. He connected me to the hiring manager. We went through a process, and I was there. And after that, I was at YouTube for the next 10 years. So I worked on a lot of ideas that were India-specific. I built out the non-Hindi business at India. Then later I moved to Singapore and I worked a lot of our Southeast Asian markets. And you sort of look at opportunities as they emerge, you catch them, and then they grow into something.
Wow. Impressive story. I've read your story. I would love for the audience to know, and for us also to know, the nitty-gritties. The nitty-gritties. How did you end up a professor? What was the story like? How does one start a company and then become a professor? It feels like almost an inverted path, but I'd love to know the path.
The path was all accidental. Professor, but I always wanted to be a professor. My father was a doctor and a professor, and he was my hero, and I wanted to emulate him. I didn't become a doctor, thankfully. I became a fake doctor, but I always wanted to become a faculty, so, I went to IIT Bombay, and then I was doing my PhD. During my PhD, this was 1993. I had just reached the US, and I'm a cricket fanatic, and we were starved of cricket information. So to satisfy our own needs, we basically ended up creating Cricinfo. It was not meant to be this big company that it became. It was just, we were cricket fans and we wanted that information. So it was all accidental. And then when Cricinfo raised a lot of money, I had to make a decision whether I should quit my PhD and join it full time, or continue my PhD and remain sort of associated remotely. I picked continuing my PhD, and then...
How much did you raise? How much did you raise?
So try to guess our first raise. This
$500,000?
was back in 1997.
$500,000? I'm just throwing a random number there. $500,000?
$500,000?
Yeah.
No, the first raise was 37.5 million.
I was off by a little bit.
That's 3 billion in today money.
Well, it was actually Satyam gave us their ADRs.
A lot of inflation around, no? Yeah. But how did you decide to continue with the PhD after raising 37.5 million? It's a big decision, no?
I'm not sure. Maybe it seemed stupid at that time, but I just wanted to do it. After a while, you need a minimum threshold of money. After that, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, and not that I was not enjoying Cricinfo, but I just enjoyed the process of research a lot. So.
Very cool. How did it go from Cricinfo? How did it go from the PhD to being a professor? Like, is that like you spend a bunch of years and then decide you want to teach, or that was the plan all along?
No. The way it works in the US is, probably around the middle of your PhD, you decide whether you want to go into industry or academia. And then, when I was graduating, I interviewed. Columbia was my top pick, being in New York City. I love New York City. It's a great school, so I picked Columbia. So I've been there since 2001. I started 2 weeks before 9/11, so that was like a very strange time to be in New York City. But I've been there since then, and my journey to AI was also accidental, as I alluded to. So, with Cricinfo, we had built this tool called StatsGuru. I don't know if you've ever seen StatsGuru.
No, I haven't.
So you can query any kind of stat on it, and cricket has a million different stats. And because you could query anything, everything was made available. And how do you do it? So there's a web form with 15 drop-downs, 25 checkboxes, 8 different text fields. It's a very daunting interface. It's been available since 2000 for free. But because this interface is so bad, almost no one uses it. Only the real cricket nerds use it. So I'm still friendly with the people who run Cricinfo. Sambit Bal, who's the editor-in-chief, he's a good friend. Whenever he comes to New York, we meet up. So I keep telling him, why don't you fix StatsGuru? So this was January of 2020. Just before COVID started, he was there. And again, he said, why don't you do something about StatsGuru? I said, and he said, why don't you do something about StatsGuru? Semi-jokingly. And that summer, the first version of GPT-3 was released in July. And I saw somebody use GPT-3 to write a SQL query using natural language for their own database. So I thought maybe I could use that to build a front end for StatsGuru. So I got early access to GPT-3. I started playing with it. Soon I realized that I couldn't do it just the way it was. So natural language processing is not my area of research. So in the process, in September of 2020, I accidentally invented what's now called RAG to solve to solve Cricinfo's problem. So we built the product, and it's been running on Cricinfo since September 2021 called Ask Cricinfo. But once I got it to work, I really wanted to understand, the thing that you've built, how does it work? So once it's got working, now, I've been spending the past couple of years trying to build a mathematical model of how LLMs are able to work, how they're able to learn on the fly and things like that. So now a lot of my research is on building a mathematical model for LLMs.
Now, I have a weird observation, okay, from all 4 stories. You tell me if you had the same observation. It almost felt like, even for you, Niki, and even for all of you, it felt like you first did something. You weren't sure what you were doing because you joined as a software engineer. You just built out the application. You built out RAG, and then you figured out, okay, what's going on beneath the hood. It's almost like you did the thing, and it's almost like you did the engineering and then tried to figure out the research and the science after that. Is that wise to say? Does experimentation play some role in your journeys?
I think with deep learning, we have definitely seen that. It's not that we have perfect theories. We don't have them today as well. So I think it has
It's an alien in a box.
Right, exactly. So I think it has been a lot of you have to start with some hypothesis, yes, for sure, but it's a lot of experimentation. It's a very empirical field. But yeah, I think at least when we reflect on our journeys, yeah, it is a lot about doing and then discovering okay, what is working and what is not, and kind of taking that forward.
Tell me the moment. Tell me the moment you saw this thing and you're like, holy, this is good. When did you become an AI, a full AI believer? And I'm going to ask this question to all of you, right? So when did you become a full AI believer? Was it after GPT-3? Sorry, was it after writing the paper? Was it after seeing GPT-3, the outputs? When did you fully believe in it? The promise of AI and AGI.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we wrote the paper and the kind of research that was happening at the time, it was all in the category of what we call supervised learning, where you have a task that is defined and you're trying to optimize for that. So in the Transformer paper, it was machine translation. I also worked on image generation and so very well-defined problems where you would have some data that you would run your experiments on. But I think when GPT-3 came out, they kind of popularized this idea that, you didn't need to train separate models. You could just have this single model where if you give it enough data about the world, and if you give it enough data about, eventually what is good versus what is bad, it's going to generalize to many other tasks. I think that was it. I think that was the moment for me.
Was it that API, the GPT-3, the playground?
I think it was the GPT-3 paper. So I think maybe ChatGPT came 1 year after that. But I think when the paper came out, they had these examples of few-shot learning, where now for machine translation, you don't need to separately train for it. You just give a few instances of how you should do the task, and the model was able to do it. So I think that was already the genesis of what's to come. I think that, along with the scaling laws paper, which both of them came at the same time, there is this bitter lesson by Richard Sutton where he says that whatever we want the machines to learn, we should not put our own human inductive biases in it, which is what we were doing in translation, right? You'd have certain rules around what makes a good translation. You should let the model figure it out. And I think GPT-3 was a very, very good example of that, and that continues to remain true today. The simpler and the more general it is and the more scalable it is, the more impact, that's the huge impact that it has. So for me, it was definitely the GPT.
Did you think it would get this good when you saw GPT, the early GPTs? Did you think it would get this good? Where we are today, the Geminis of the world and the Claudes of the world, did you think we'd get here?
I think, yes, the idea was always there. I think the initial, in fact, the term artificial intelligence, it was coined in 1954 or something at the Dartmouth conference. And it was always about teaching machines, the same kind of learning generalization and the same skills that human has. It was a matter of time, but I think we're all a little bit less creative when it comes to really think about the applications of all the things that AI can do. But I think after that initial paper and when you see the scaling law trend, you don't see it flattening out. So I think it was, yeah, you could kind of project that, yes, we're going to have like maybe an AI scientist, we're going to have an AI coder, we're going to have like a lot of these different things we see today.
I have a follow-up question to this, which I'm going to ask after we finish this specific round, which is, now that you foresaw what we got to today, I want you to make predictions for the next 4 years, but we'll come to that in a bit. Okay? Sid, when did you know AI was the moment?
When I discovered that when I was watching you on video, it wasn't actually you.
Really?
That was the moment. No, so really, what I was doing then was, so I think for me, right, in a very tangible manner, at that time I was at YouTube, right, and for the last decade at Google, you could see how AI was powering everything under the hood, right? Everything. I remember, 10 years ago when Google Photos launched and you could search for a name and you'd find a face, right? That was magic then. Now we take it for granted. But there's been evolution of that. But it was this sort of utilitarian thing with moments of delight. But when I could start seeing it in content, where you could generate a video, generate a picture, right, generate a sound, you start doing that, it felt very tangible to me. And I think each of us might have these moments over the last year, over the next few years, where you see something which sort of just emotionally catches you and you say, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening. And for me, being a content person at that point of time, that's what really gripped my attention. And I felt something visceral about it. And then when you started thinking about, hey, what could this be? And also researching what's actually happening under the hood, that's when I was sold, right? And then, yeah, a little while later, here I am.
That's crazy. I prompted a career switch. That's nice. Vishal, when did you know? I mean, you already told us when you knew, but what was the exact moment?
So it came in 2 stages. I'm a lot older, but the first time AI really hit me was when Google Photos was released. So when when you upload your photos to Google Photos, it starts classifying them into different people. And I uploaded the photos on my phone first, and it had photos of my daughter, who was, I think, 4 years old at that time. So it put different photos in different buckets. Then I started uploading the library on my disk, on my photos library. And there it had photographs of my daughter when she was born. So initially, it classified that as a different person. But as it kept on uploading more and more photos, it merged the two. And that's when I was really, first time, really impressed with deep learning, that there's something really interesting in there. And the second time was when, I got access to GPT-3, and within half a day, I was able to get it to write StatsGuru queries. It had no idea what StatsGuru was, what internal mechanisms it used, but I was able to teach it so easily without getting access to the internals of GPT-3. That's when, the second time, the power of AI hit me.
That's incredible. Such a powerful tool, right? All of us have had these moments where we turned from skeptics to believers, and it's one of the only technologies where, at least I'm far younger, right? So first things in my lifetime where I saw something and suddenly it became
that hurt.
No, I mean, I'm far younger than most people, I would say, like from the old generation. So I haven't seen the mobile revolution. Like I was too young for the mobile revolution, so I never saw the aha moment. But this one, I saw the aha moment and I realized, oh, this was cool. And it's crazy that everyone has a specific defining moment, or 1 or 2 defining moments where they start believing. Let's get into future prediction. Everyone want to know what's coming in the next 4 or 5 years? Okay. Niki, I'm going to come to you last. Let's clickbait. Okay. Vishal, I want you to start. You've seen this technology grow. You've used it. What comes in the next 4 years? And it's okay to be wrong on this panel because no one's going to care. Even if it's recorded, nobody's going to care. But I want 4 bold predictions which you're willing to put your sort of name on. And it has to be predictions, no safe predictions.
4.
3 good predictions.
Okay, so one thing that, we've spoken a lot about scaling laws. I think we are going to go in the reverse direction. We're going to get much faster, much smaller, much more focused models that will be used to solve real business problems. These large language models, they're fantastic, but they know about quantum gravity and Python coding. You don't really need all of that in one model. So I think the development is going to be much smaller, much focused models, and they will run on your phones. They will run on the edge. So you'll get much faster responses, they'll be much more reliable, and they'll be solving business problems. So I think the direction is not bigger, but smaller and more accurate.
Interesting. Any other predictions? I'll give you one more, this thing. Something that they can take away, something that they can actually utilize. I mean, the small models is useful because now people can actually start working with small models and go where the puck is going.
So the other thing is that people keep worrying about what AGI is and when it'll come. I think AGI is going to be a moving target. And, I think Chief Minister Fadnavis said in the morning that human intelligence will always be better than artificial intelligence. So an example of that is, when the camera came about, when it was invented, it was around the same time abstract art got invented. Because people were sort of freed from making portraits and landscapes, which now the camera could do. So they venture into more creative things. So I think as these models and LLMs, they become more and more powerful, they'll do a lot of the mundane tasks, but human creativity would expand into different directions. So I'm not afraid of AGI, I'm not afraid of these models taking our jobs. They will create new areas for us to explore.
Interesting.
That's my second.
Interesting. Sid, you represent 11 labs. You are there, you are talking to clients every day. You know the space, you know the commercial space better than anybody. What are your predictions for the next 4 years?
So what I would say is, over the next few years, I think these things will play out. The first is, I think, suddenly everybody is able to sort of create whatever they want, right? And that's going to create a very interesting dynamic where anybody can do anything, but then a few people can do something really, really well, right? So I think we're going to have this moment where I think we're going to be a problem of extreme plenty. There's never going to be sort of a middleman or a barrier to sort of put out the thing that you want. And at the same time, real talent actually shines even more, like something really special in a vast ocean of plenty, right? So I think that's one thing which is very interesting. I think the second thing is, if you sort of look at how we have interacted with each other and how we're interacting also with, let's say, institutions, I think that's going to change. So if you think about interaction, say 100, 150 years ago, the message had a huge factor of time. With the written word, the message is delivered to you the next day or a week later, right? Then it became a modality over just voice. Then it was streamed visually, and then it was two ways, right? But still, if you think about it, a lot of those interactions are largely one way. I think a lot of these interactions are going to become conversational because you can, and you can do that at scale, and you can do that extremely personally. So I think that's the second thing which is going to play out over the next few years. The third thing is, I think, in a lot of cases, not every case, but I think the org chart as we sort of know it in companies, that may not make as much sense anymore. Because if you sort of think of, in any job, right, if you almost look at, you're putting a vada pav together, there is a bun, then there's a pav, there's a vada, there's a masala, so forth, so on. But what that is and that order is going to look very different, and the capability sets are going to look different, right? So I think if you're thinking about roles, what do those new roles look like, and how are companies sort of rethinking that? I think that's definitely something that's playing out, right? And then the last part is, I think everybody's going to become super picky. Everyone's going to say, this is exactly what I want, how I want it, on my terms, and they will get it, right? This extreme personalization, I think we're already seeing it play out in content, but it's going to play out in everything. Now, what does that actually mean? I think let's find out, but we're already starting to see those signs.
I want to give you an example. You're right about the last point, because yesterday I was spending time with a friend, and he was wearing the Ray-Bans. There's another friend, he's like, you're wearing Ray-Bans. Everyone has Ray-Bans. Then the other guy was like, no, I have, and these are not friends, some place I was at, right? And the other guy was like, oh, but I'm wearing some other brand. I'm like, oh, but I also have that. So everyone has the same brand. And in my head, I was like, there is no way for these people left to differentiate, because everyone has disposable income, so they're all buying the same brands, and they're not discovering random niche brands. They're all going after the same one. So the only way to differentiate is to make your own clothing, no? Which AI lets you do.
But even if you take the glasses example, there is possibly some version of the future where even with the same glasses, everybody's literally seeing the world a different way. Your little view of the physical world is customized and personalized in a way that only you want, right? Now, what does that mean in terms of perspective and opinions? Let's find out. But that's already happening in this world.
Interesting. You're on the spot. And by the way, you can get very technical about this. I'll convert it to layperson speak, or I'll try my best to convert it to layperson speak. But if, 4 years in, where does pre-training, we saw GPT 4.5 today. Where does pre-training go? Where does reasoning go? Are there new breakthroughs around the frontier? Is Jan LeCun's JEPA going to work? Tell us everything. 4 years.
Yeah, I think first of all, I'll say that I agree with the personalization view. I think we're going to see, a lot of that where I think people will discover like their own preferences and opinions, and like we're going to have a system that actually adheres to that. I think if I were to make my predictions, we were just talking about GPT-3 and the kind of like few short example behavior that kind of generalized to many tasks. I think about something similar like that, but now for maybe more agentic tasks. Like, so now imagine that, it's not all about text or a few things that you can fit in the context, but if I could record and show the model, like, okay, these are the few things that, I want to like teach the model, in a very agentic sense, it's probably going to learn to like kind of explore the new environment, like if it's a new game, or if it's like a new task, or if it's a new coding application. Like imagine like models begin to explore that by themselves, figure out, okay, what is success, what is failure, what works, what doesn't work in a safe manner. And then it starts generalizing to newer and newer tasks. I think we're going to see some form of that coming through. And what that means is that I think today models still don't orchestrate the high-level kind of like planning or all the sub-steps that are required to actually finish something end-to-end. But we're going to see that models will have the capability to not only do the task, but also orchestrate between the different components. Now,
why can't they orchestrate today, if you had to explain it to them?
I think it's just, they could probably in a one-off setting, but I think the reliability will be too low, or the handoff, like, what you need to retain, what knowledge you need to retain, like, okay, when an error happens, like, which part actually went wrong, like, those things are hard. And I think the other thing is in the agentic setting, if you imagine that everything is an environment, and you're just modeling the process of like what happens in the environment, so now you have many characters. Maybe you have different kinds of models, you have the user, and maybe you have the environment itself like giving signals.
Yeah, I saw Claude play Pokemon.
Right, exactly, and which was like completely out of distribution, right? And it just kind of discovered the actions, the moves, and it was able to make progress. Now just imagine that in the real world.
The only problem is playing Pokemon Fire Red is actually harder than most jobs. That's the only problem. Assuming it's a computer job, right? So,
right.
So what then happens to if agent, like let's say you're saying that it'll learn by itself, right? It'll learn through failure and success. Easy signals for failure and success on, let's say, a trading platform. You lost money, you won money. But somebody with infinite money would say, well, make small bets and learn. So eventually this will outtrade traders. And it will have learned by itself. It will learn its own strategy. We won't know. It will be opaque to us. So how do you think this will affect people doing jobs? Are they going to use agents? And then it's going to be powerful agents against each other, whoever's up to date with the models? Or is there a way to continue to differentiate when it's like two semi-gods fighting each other?
No, I think we will need people as well. We will need humans. And I think there's just something about our generalization ability from like extremely few examples that is hard to replicate. I think there's also like some amount of maybe empathy combined with our experience, with the expertise that we have developed. I think that will come into play. I think I agree with like what the panel was saying, that maybe it does not look like the job structure that we have today. Maybe it does not look like 5 roles needed maybe for the same department. That starts to look different. And I think it'll be like a lot of like, like across many, many fields and across the breadth, we will see that AI will actually do a lot of the jobs. But I think like the expertise that people will develop, I think will play a role of like, being the companion or being kind of like a collaborator to you. So I think when I was talking about like AI itself being the orchestrator, I think it will be still guided by users. And what we'll see is that maybe like Claude or like, some AI model will do hours of work for you, and you'll be able to make progress at a much faster rate. Today, like a lot of the systems don't really work for us. They still like, every time you're trying to like build a new application, you're trying to add a new feature. I'm sure like when you're trying to like make a video itself, it still is a lot of different steps. So I think we're just going to see tightening of that, and maybe we'll start discovering, new problem spaces, which ultimately, like, like a prediction I would make is like, AI will solve a scientific problem, maybe in a span of 3 to 4 years. I would like to see that happen. I think that means that there's so many open problems in the universe, and we're just going to be able to make progress on that extremely quickly.
That's good. That's a great answer. Agents, scientific problems are your two bets.
And I think the third thing I would say is definitely on the people side is that I think I'm seeing more and more that the way people learn and acquire skills is just not going to be the same. So maybe we'll go through like this transition period where maybe the old guard is going to like, it's going to be harder and harder. Like sometimes I will not end up using as many AI tools because I feel like maybe I can do the job better, but then I know that I can be so much more faster if I have the tools, which we're seeing, I think, with a lot of the young people. And I think it's going to be that combined with like special expertise that will probably like, like help us move the frontier.
That's an awesome answer. I have questions for all three of you now. Considering this is coming, you've seen all of this, it's happened in 2-3 years. What happens to schooling and education now? Right? Because there is a person that has spent now considerable 4 years of their time thinking that the brand name on their, whatever the college that they went to, and especially India is known for, overinflated number of degrees. We already had a problem with unskilled labor, but suddenly a lot of this unskilled labor, and I'm noticing this in our own company as well, right? A lot of unskilled labor can quickly pick up new things, like you said, not only because they're learning, because it's if the difference between you and another person is just a prompt, right? 3 lines, 5 lines, 10 lines, then even the person who might not have the excellence of, I know how to cut out audio, I know how to do it perfectly, is able to, like, a dubbing artist would spend years getting good. But now someone can use 11 Labs and generate like, an entire voice script. So if you are hiring for a dubbing artist, now this person can do it much easier, right? So I want to know what happens to the future of education, both K-12 as well as, your degree, your undergrad, your postgrad, and your professor, so you would know most about this. So I want to hear from your perspective how you think education will change.
So I don't know if I know the most about it, but this is a topic that's of discussion almost every day at any major university. And the thing is, initially when ChatGPT and these things came out, some people took the approach that, oh, no, we're going to ban the usage of that. That's never going to work. So what you want to do is figure out how do you use these tools to increase your rate of learning, to aid your learning, and not to think of that this will substitute your learning. So we are redesigning a lot of courses. We are thinking of new ways to use these models. And depending on the class, the use of these models, if it's a database class versus a class in philosophy or creative writing, it's going to be very, very different. So depending on the context, we are actually encouraging, think of it as a tool like Google. It's there. People use it. But then you design your curriculum and your teaching that you're aware that they're going to be using these tools, but how do you sort of increase the learning because they're using these tools? So one of the things that I do, I teach a class in networking. And what I did was, in my first homework, I gave a previous year's homework problem to ChatGPT to solve. And my homework problem was, I gave the problem and ChatGPT solution, which had errors. There are some subtle errors, but there were errors. So my homework to the class was find the errors and give the right answer. So this did 2 things. First of all, they really had to understand the material to understand where it went wrong. Secondly, they started trusting the model less. That, okay, it can make mistakes. So then you learn how to use models the right way. So, education is going to change dramatically. Another benefit of these models is
It feels like you're training them for model use. It feels like this is like a Venom symbiote type of thing, and you're teaching them how to use the suit. It just feels like that.
Well, use this tool, and the tools can also benefit you. Yet, as professors, often, you're teaching something, and then you ask the class, "Do you have any questions?" Almost no one raises their hand. It's because a lot of people are very shy, and they think that the questions that they have are stupid. But if you ask them to go and ask the same questions to a TA chatbot, they will do that. And so what that does is it actually closes the learning gap. People who are too shy to ask, people who are too afraid to ask, they can quickly get up to speed using these chatbots. So it's not all negative that people just use them for plagiarism and solving homework problems. It actually helps them learn. So we're thinking of all the creative ways where we can change the curriculum, keeping in mind that these things are there.
I have a point to add here, which is I've started reading books slightly differently. So, by the way, the anatomy of any book, history, science, philosophy, I mean, science is different, textbooks are different, but it's usually like a person will give a point and then give a bunch of stories or anecdotes to support that point. So it's like some thesis, some insight, some data to support that insight, some stories to support that. So usually these three things in any book, right? Most books in the bookstore would have this. What I do now is I go to OpenAI's deep research, okay? And I will put a book's name and I will say, listen, I want you to do deep research and structure this such that every chapter, I want it split into what is the insight, what is the anecdotes, the stories, and what is the data. Please separate and give it to me in one long list, chapter by chapter. So I did this last with this book called The 15 Decisive Battles of the World. So it told me every single battle. Here's how Attila the Hun fought. Here's how this one fought. Like, for example, there was a fight between Alexander the Great and Darius from the Persian Empire, right? And it gave me the entire synopsis of the fight, what happened, what are the reasons why he won. And it also gave me, in anecdotes, it said that Darius had actually come to Alexander about 30 days before the battle, and he said, let's share the empire. Let's have half-half. You know what Alexander said to him? There can never be two sons. It's just a nice anecdote. So it's almost like you can now compress books because of deep research. So maybe the books don't need a lot of padding, filler words that they currently have. You can read a book now in a 5th grader language. You can read it in a 10th grader language. Like, it's really very useful, right? Some concepts I don't understand, I ask, for simple stuff. So interesting to see that that's how it's going to change. How do you think the future of education is going to change?
I want to go back to what you'd opened this with, right? So I think for this room, in the last 5 years, what's sort of the worst time in your life? I mean, on average, I think we can all agree it's probably lockdown, right? Why? Because we're all stuck in a room, no company, isolated, and it just doesn't work in terms of who we are, right? So in terms of that, I think there are maybe 2 to 3 things worth thinking about, right? Like, one is education is not just curriculum, right? So I think as we sort of see this, to echo what he says, I think just like 50 years ago, you were learning one way. 15 years ago, maybe it was notebooks and pens. Now, computers are part in every classroom. Hey, now we have more assistive tools, right? And at the same time, the way you treat someone in primary school versus college, that's going to be different. The second thing is you get a lot of optionality, right? So you can do a lot more of things in a pedagogy that suits you to add on top of sort of what is the default method, right? And I think all of us find that different learning styles work for us in a different way. But you also break the physics of time. Hey, I have this teacher for 30 minutes, and that's great. But what if I can unlock them for 6 hours more or 3 hours more in the morning, because that works best for me in the way I learn? So these are new things that sort of come in on top of the experiential aspect. I think the third part is, when it sort of comes to learning or skilling, so, you talked about, for example, productions, and now anybody can do it. But, Varun, let me ask you this. You run a successful content and tech company, and you have many employees, and, they do some fantastic stuff. Do they just walk in off the road and start doing it? They go through a curve, right? And there is a massive skilling curve, right? So even if you sort of think in that area, there too, it's a new set of things, right? It's a new Photoshop. It's the new Nikon. So I think there is that education too to be done, which is again skilling in a different way with a new set of technologies and modalities, right? So I think some of the things around who we are as people, that continues to be the same. But two, you get a lot more flexibility and optionality. And then three, what we're getting skilled on, maybe that also changes as it always has. And here's the next latest set of powerful capabilities. So yeah, I think that's how this will likely play out.
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with that. And I think there is a skill, but I don't know if you can categorize the skill as a specific degree. It's almost like you need to know a lot about the world and also know specifics about what you're doing. It's so weird. Like, education in general needs a change. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, the barrier to entry, gets significantly lowered with AI. I remember, at least, I know that I had certain barriers just because of where I was or, who I was surrounded with. And I think that gets changed now with the tools that we have available. And I think, both of, what Vishal and Siddharth were saying, I think it's this, and what you were saying with the book, right, reading the book, I think it's this process of discovery that we've kind of lost. You don't really get a chance to do that. When you have set curriculums or a specific way of learning in school or acquiring skills, I think it doesn't suit to everyone's preferences. Sometimes I may want to spend more time on a subject versus not. So I think what we will have is this this amazing process of discovery and self-exploration and in ways that we've not seen before. And I think it's only going to uplift people at large because when I think about the AI field, it was an extremely small community of deep learning in 2015. And now it's so many people. But it's not that it's hurting the field. There's only more and more things happening. There's things happening at the systems level, infra level, application level, models level, architecture level, everything, right? And you see more and more examples of a small group of people, young people discovering, winds and inference or DeepSeek or so many other examples. So I just feel like the barrier has lowered so much that I think people who are willing and who are interested and want to do, I think they can go on really deep, kind of discoveries with models, with the information that is available, test out their theories very quickly, and broadly, uplift, set of people and broadly make impact on a field. So I feel, I think there's going to be something amazing, in that kind of learning that will happen. At least I feel that, I think I agree that, sometimes you're afraid to ask questions. You're like, I don't know if this is the right thing or not. And then when you do and you realize, oh yeah, actually I was right.
Because is that a group setting problem? Because I have a question. I have a problem asking questions if I'm in a classroom because I'm like, are my friends going to judge me if I ask this question? Is the teacher going to get annoyed? But do you think the one-on-one mentorship where the AI is talking to you, it's private, so you feel like you can be stupid?
Yeah, it's like AI can be your personalized AI tutor, right? And I think we all benefit from a tutor or a mentor when we have one. I think we'll still need other people for sure, and we're going to have to validate our ideas and have discussions. But I think it is that kind of personal touch.
Is that a status thing? The reason people don't ask questions to the professor? Is it because they're afraid they'll be judged by everybody else? Or?
There are many different reasons. One is that they are afraid that they'll be judged. Second is people are just shy. So it's a personality issue, and there's several different reasons, but the end result is people don't ask as many questions as they should be. Personally, the best part for me for teaching is when somebody asks a question, and then I can answer it. Just regurgitating something, talking through your slides or doing something on your blackboard. If there's no interaction, it's not fun, and students don't learn. But it's very difficult to convince them that, no, you should be asking questions. But with chatbot, they feel free. They feel, nobody's judging them. They don't have to worry that it's stupid. They don't have to worry that people will think, oh, this person doesn't even know X, Y, or Z. So they're able to catch up rapidly using these tools.
Privacy valuable?
Yeah, it's very valuable.
I think it is also cultural. Sometimes I think culture differences also play along.
So you're saying in India, the culture is such that you're a little afraid, but now that you have an AI bot, you have the liberty to be stupid, right? With somebody in private where it's not going to make fun of you, it's not going to bully you.
It's also, if you're from India, I have a colleague at Columbia. he came to me, he says, why are Indian students always doubting what I teach? Because they always say, I have a doubt. When you say, I have a doubt, it means a very different thing in the US. You ask a question, you don't doubt something. But in India, that's what we say, I have a doubt. So he came to me very seriously, why are they always doubting what I teach? So cultural issues also play a part.
And AI sort of can sort of adapt to your culture because it knows what you mean when you say doubt for some reason. Okay, I have another question, which is, let's talk about business for a second. AI for business. We've heard a lot about how, first we heard rappers were bad. Everyone know what a rapper is? Everyone know what an AI rapper is? Like it's a product built on top of the models. Everyone in the beginning said they were bad. Then for a while they said they were good because there's no moat in the underlying models. And now they're back to maybe rappers are bad again, right? Now that new models have come out. Please let me know what you think are the opportunities in AI for business, considering that it's getting easier and easier to build products, and I assume software is getting easier to make. So what do you guys think about products? Yeah, Sid, you should start.
Sure. I mean, how many times do we go out and buy a car versus buying an engine? Right? You buy a fully formed product that can do all of the things that you need it to do, right? And maybe at some level today, we are sort of in that engine phase of 1800 horsepower, 2000, 2000, 3000 horsepower. But finally, what every customer, consumer, stakeholder needs is a fully formed product.
That's a great analogy.
So if you think about it in 2 to 4 years, you are going to talk products and solutions, which is what you need to go above a certain critical scale. And at that point, those who build that out, they're just going to be companies in that space. And this is going to be one of the other set of things they do under the hood, like all technologies before that. And we already see that today, right? So for example, with 11 Labs, the reason we sort of had the success we've had is not just because of the capabilities of the research, but because of the productization, because of the workflows, because of the great APIs, which fit into the workflows of our customers, which helps them drive adoption and scale, right? So I think finally this unlocks a set of powers, but then how do you sort of use it? I think everything's got to play out there. Now, the model companies themselves can build some fantastic products. We obviously see that with Claude, we see that with ChatGPT and Gemini and so forth, so on, and there are a set of things. But then I think unlocking that value as you go super duper deep, I think that's interesting. So for example, here's interesting. If you look at the local space, why are we showing big directories being unbundled into really deep vertical experiences? Furniture, house help, travel, so forth, so on. Because I can build really, really deep product solutions to your consumer journey. And when you get a set of capabilities this powerful, well, you have to do that because otherwise I'll be wrestling a bucking bronco into shape, right? It's surely going to play out that way.
Interesting. What do you think? You build Cricinfo.
Well, so I think there are two classes of products that you can build with AI. One are, the creative products like 11 Labs, where beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be interesting. The other class of products is, what's supposed to replace the SaaS products. There you have to be, if it's mission critical, you need that sort of enterprise grade performance. Engineering used to mean building something with 5 nines reliability. But if you look at the benchmarks of all the foundation models on a lot of these tasks, it's improving. Sometimes for something it's 70%, 78%, 80%. Nobody in the enterprise works with something that gives you that level of accuracy. So I think for those classes of products which are not creative, you need maybe a human in the loop. So a product that works only 80% of the time, 20% of it fails completely, I don't think that's going to catch on. But a product that 100% of the time does 95% of your work, 98% of your work, and you have to twiddle or tweak it a little bit, I think that has legs. So I think for creative users, these models are already good enough to build real products. For the other domain where you need accuracy, I think a human in the loop is still required. People are not ready to trust agents to do mission critical stuff. Even for things like your booking of air tickets, you still want to see what the agent brought back to you.
But what do you think about commoditization from the sense of now everybody can build a product easier because you have tools like...
Absolutely. I think these, DeepSeek and so many open source models, using these models is becoming a lot easier. Then what you have to do is you have to build some sort of plumbing on top of them so that you can build or get the accuracy that you need. So it's becoming a lot more easier. These models, the open source models are good enough for a lot of the tasks. And it's up to,
creativity to come up with use cases.
Wrappers, but I think there's a lot of future in there.
Niki?
Yeah,
By the way, you can disagree with everyone if you want to.
Yeah, I think that AI wrappers that only improve existing processes are bad. I think as we've seen, it's going to be hard to sustain any kind of advantage when the capabilities itself move. It's going to be with a lot of AI, we're seeing like the process itself changes. So if you're going to do something existing a little bit better, or if you're going to do like some steps in an existing workflow through AI, I don't think that's going to sustain very well because you're not going to have a first mover advantage. Like there's no first mover advantage here. The capabilities are going to move. So maybe you get some advantage through like the distribution side or the go-to-market side, maybe from the commercial aspect. But right now we're in a technology-first world. The technology is dictating what products will be built, not the other way around. It's not that, oh, we have this particular problem and this use case, and that's why we're building AI. We're not in that phase today. And very few times we have that moment, right, where we're actually building capabilities, and through the capabilities, we're discovering new products like Notebook LM or deep research or operator or computer use. So I think we're going to see a lot of like churn maybe on like the wrapper side. But I think what is interesting is I think there are areas that have been overlooked by technology, maybe like law and like manufacturing, health, which I think are seeing a revolution because you don't even have some of the basics of technology there, or maybe like now it becomes possible and it was not before. So I feel like product companies in those areas are pretty interesting. But otherwise, it is a technology-first initiative right now.
How does Anthropic think about the commoditization of the base models themselves? Anything they build, OpenAI will have later, or Google will have later. Like, how do the base models think about this?
So with Anthropic, we released Claude Code, which was a Bash terminal product where you can just interact, with the model, and it understands your code base and understands your context. So I think we do want to make AI generally useful for consumers, for enterprises, for businesses. But I think we're not saying that like, hey, this is the singular product or this is the singular capability we're building. We're thinking about general users of AI, and we're both partnering with organizations who are building products and like selling the API, to enterprises and other businesses.
If you had a timeline for when 99% of problems can be solved by auto-generating code, like when do you think code is going to get solved? Because Anthropic has had this
I think in the next 2 years.
2 years? So 2027 is when I can type English and I have a full code base ready.
I think so, yeah.
And reasonably certain. I mean, you can't be reasonably
I think this
certain.
is my own personal opinion. I think we're going to see like maybe 90 to 95% of code just being solved in the next 2 years.
Then that's a weird world to live in. I have to think about that, in a bit. But this is super interesting. I have one last question, okay? And this is around, if you were 20 years old today, okay? You had no money, you're just starting out your career, you don't have a degree, you're deciding, maybe you're 18 years old, and you don't have a degree, you're deciding which college to go into, what career stream to take, what to do. You have no idea of any of this. And you're watching all these Instagram reels by people giving all sorts of different advice. And you decide to put that away. What would you do knowing what you know today? Sid, you want to start?
I think...
Step by step. Because a lot of people listening and they're going to make decisions based on this.
Yeah, I think if you're 20 today, then you're probably in the middle of some course. And, you're a year or two from completing it. So, we are there. And that's fine, right? You're about to enter some industry. So I think whatever that industry is that you're sort of going to enter or your options there, I think the mechanics of the industry are probably the same in that sense, where hey, here is a customer problem, here is how the customers engage with the companies in the space, and you understand that. What you need to sort of do is to think about the relevancy of the skill set and the education that you have today versus 2 to 3 years later, and how can that change? So how do you do this? I think there's enough literature and content there across all formats, right? You know, from companies, information, YouTube, blogs, newsletters, so forth, so on, to sort of keep abreast with what is changing very fast. And the third thing that you have to do is to use all of the amazing educational resources that are online to start moving with that. And by the way, this is not a one-time effort. It'll continuously change over the years to come. And you sort of do that. That's 3. Then the last thing is try to find yourself in a place which is more receptive to this change than joining a place which does things in the old way, because that company and you may start becoming obsolete. This is what I'd say.
Interesting. You're 20 years old. What would you do?
Well, so, today it's going to be an AI-first world. AI and compute are going to be part of everything. So you should understand how these things work, why they work, and be part of that. Aside from that, the purpose of going to college or getting an education is not to learn something specific, but to learn how to learn. So as long as you're doing you sort of maintain your curiosity. Then as things change, in 2 years if we solve coding, maybe there's something new interesting that will come up, and you have to learn something new. So learn how to learn. Doesn't matter what you're doing, but go and put your heart into it, learn how to learn. Just don't try to pass an exam. If you maintain your curiosity, I think that'll serve you well.
But India makes it all about exams.
Sorry?
India makes it all about exams. How would you fight that? Because everyone around you is taking the exam very seriously.
You take exams seriously, but never forget why you're there, trying to learn. And that serves you well in life.
Okay.
I think just from a personal opinion, I think I would study biology or maybe chemistry or something. I think there's so many open problems there.
I don't know if you heard that. She said, I would study biology or chemistry because there are open problems. I actually agree with that.
Because I think, it would be an AI first world, and I think maybe AI will enable me to move faster in those fields, which we've seen less of maybe over the last 20, 30 years. Sequencing, the cost of sequencing has reduced from $1 million to $1,000 or $100, which is amazing, which means that you can get a lot of data and maybe you can discover many more things in that field. But that's just from a personal opinion. But I think I agree with the advice here that I think you just kind of pick something and you kind of go deep in it, or you do a lot of just applications and try things and just build stuff, and you'll kind of discover your way from there.
I think we're out of time. This has been a great session. I have learned a lot. I just came here, typically I look at the audience and talk half the time, but I just came here just learning so much, right? Learning what it looks like from academia, learning what it looks like from business, learning what it looks like from the research side. I have learned so much. My takeaway is coding is done by 2027. I'm just kidding. My takeaway is that I think it is important to be a forever learner in this world. If I'm just summarizing, to be a forever learner, to be somebody that is fluid and flexible in the world that's coming, and to also be interested in things other than just sitting on a computer and writing Word documents, right? You still do a lot of that in that space, but maybe now AI can do some of the menial or the easy or the hard work there which you didn't have to. It's phenomenal, and I think for many of you sort of here, there'll be a day where you have this robot in this very futuristic house, sitting and talking to you and helping you do everything. Is 20, 30 years, maybe 50 years in the future, whenever, right? And then you are going to say, this robot is speaking to me, but you know where this all started? It started with attention is all you need, right? And you'll be like, I know the author of the paper now. She's here. So I think time has meeting people, building a network has been one of the most valuable parts of my life. And I think it's because you now get to see the people who are doing the awesome things in the world. You get to see them in person. You get to know them. 11 Labs, we hear about 11 Labs every day, right? I use it every day. It's almost like it's such an honor for me to be using a tool and then to have the India representative of the tool to be in front of me on a panel. It's a wild dream, right? It's almost like it was impossible when I was younger. And even Crick Info is something that everyone used to talk about when I was young. To have, the person that helped build it here is just such an honor. And I think it's also, this is something that they will take back. Thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, bye.
Thank you for doing it.